It makes it really enjoyable, actually, to practice noticing things because God inhabits this world. You're in a God-bathed world, and you're going to find Him. When you look for Him, we're going to find Him in some pretty surprising ways.
Greetings and welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Very glad to have you along. In the last episode, Isaac Funk and I had a conversation on living in the ordinary life. I'm really happy in this episode to bring to you a continuation of that conversation, where Isaac helps us see the beauty that can be found when we slow down and walk the pace of Jesus.
Even trying to carve out time and space to find that quiet time for yourself and God, and like as vital as that is and as difficult as that is, even more difficult and even more vital than that is finding that quiet heart, that peaceable heart, and bringing that into the bustle of your everyday life, into those ordinary spaces and into your communities. So Jesus is our ultimate example of doing that well.
I really like that. In fact, that even kind of raises a provocative point that says, are we increasingly unnatural in the way that we live life? And I think it's a pretty common phrase that we hear. Life is so busy and we're moving at faster speeds than ever we have, which is true. For most of mankind, even going from point A to point B at 70 miles an hour was not possible. And when I do move at that speed, I have to forfeit certain senses. My sense of smell is actually meaningless at 70 miles an hour down the road. There's very little that certain senses mean to us.
Yeah.
And that's just one little illustration. But just even in our minds, how much we can possibly compute of all of the stimulus coming into us, right?
Yeah.
Now we can extrapolate this to the way that we peruse, social media sites and the way that we take in 1,000 stimuluses, right? Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder, Isaac, would slowing down help us get back to how it is and living according to our frame and according to our creation, right?
It's really hard to say, well, let's get rid of our cars and on all of our technology and things like that. Which, some people do that, and for a purpose maybe like this. But I think it just speaks more to the point that it's more difficult now than ever probably to cultivate that heart of quietness amongst that quickness, that speed that you're talking about. It just reminds me of how vital the training is, really. We talk about things like spiritual disciplines that become the practices, the training that people can engage in deliberately that would enable them to more easily bring that sort of life, that sort of a quiet heart into these perhaps overstimulated environments.
Give us a technique. What would be a way that a person could, yes, in the hustle and bustle, in the craziness, live closer to Christ's pace and be a better observer and noticer of his surroundings?
Yeah.
What would that technique or what would that learning practice look like?
There are two that come to mind pretty quickly when trying to form a heart of awareness towards God and towards others. One is that a grateful heart leads to that pretty directly. And so if we engage, say, with a practice like, whether you're a journaler or not, some people have engaged with this practice of gratitude journaling, where maybe every morning or maybe at the end of the day, they'll look back on their day and they'll just write down all the things that happened that day that they're thankful for. And just trying to remind themselves of all of the ways that God has been with them and blessed them and the people that they love and know. And
you're being a noticer in that moment.
Right. You're taking the time, you're taking deliberate pause, perhaps even scheduled time to train your mind to be tuned to those things. And the more you do those, the easier it becomes to have a grateful heart. You'll find that starts to settle into you more naturally. Another activity that you can engage in deliberately would be something like silence and solitude, where you really are going off and being alone, as Jesus himself did, and just finding time to just rest and just to be with God and realizing that You don't have to make things happen. Your value, your worth, your being loved is not contingent upon your work or your action. And you, as you are valuable to God and have a place of belonging in his care.
Isaac, when it comes to silence and solitude, I think one of the pushbacks that people give to those particular disciplines is they can turn inward. In fact, they are somewhat inward and perhaps turn selfish, right? I need my time. It could be quickly characterized as my time. So certainly you've thought through that. Help us think correctly about those.
If we want to be people who can take a heart of solitude, a heart of silence, a heart that is quieted and able to be aware of God and of others, you're going to have to practice that somewhere, because very rarely you're just going to be able to just do that by direct effort in the moment of your ordinary lives. If you understand it as, well, this is just a training for my heart to experience what is it like to be in quiet before God. So then it becomes more easy to bring that with you wherever you are. And another part of it too is that it really enables you to serve other people far better than you ever would have been able to otherwise without having a quieted heart. Because there's just this very thing we've been talking about. It's really hard to be aware. It's really hard to notice people unless you have a heart that's able to slow down, to notice, to linger, to pause, to honor, to respect other people and their humanity in the way that Jesus did. So being able to practice something like silence and solitude, carving out that time, enables you to love people better in the way that Jesus himself did.
That's so well said. And Jesus is that example, because you saw his silence and solitude, which he did engage in, was for the sake of others. And it wasn't an end in and of itself, but was a means to that end.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a means to an end.
Silence and solitude, I think we know those at a high level, and they kind of explain themselves, right? Silence, what more is there to say, right? Solitude, it only means one thing. But when we engage in these things, as I have tried, I find that I'm not silent at all inside my head, or I'm not in isolation inside my head either. I find all kinds of things are present with me. Is that wrong? Am I not doing it right? What needs to be done in these moments to practice these things?
Well, I think especially at the beginning times of practicing these things, that is the experience of nearly everybody. This like, wow, there's a whole lot going on here that is perhaps to some people really, really troubling actually. And it's like, I'm worse off now than before I ever tried this. But I think the key is just, not to work yourself up about it, but then to notice what are those things that are controlling my thoughts right now or taking my attention, and then just make an effort to deliver those to the feet of Jesus. Set those aside, see if you can do that for a time, and just do it one by one, call out what it is. And if things continue to return, maybe God's trying to speak something through that, right? And you can uncover what that is and have a time of communion with God over perhaps that particular issue that keeps arising in your mind. But regardless of what that experience is like, it's an opportunity for communion. It's an opportunity for engaging in that relationship with God, engaging your senses, engaging your awareness so that you can just notice even your own heart, even your own self before God.
I like that, engaging the senses to notice. And I do think it's a skill that can be grown. Is that a true statement?
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Something to be grown. This past spring, I was out hunting mushrooms. And that is an exercise of slow. It is an exercise of notice. It is an exercise of inspection to a painful level for any of us who move quickly or who quickly get bored. The scanning of the timber floor. But what I kind of was blessed by, Isaac, is all that surprised me by what I noticed, that I could have never noticed without the process.
Mm-hmm.
I learned, Isaac, that for every 1,000 bluebells, there is a white bluebell, a white bell, I guess. And for every 1,000 white ones, there's a pink one. Something that I couldn't have ever seen at that rate. I'm curious, Isaac, from that analogy, do these disciplines open up into a world of wonder that might be surprising to us?
The way that God surprises his people, it just never stops. He is endlessly creative and imaginative in the way that he meets us and in his own creation. And the more that we can have eyes to see that, it almost takes the spiritual life, and if I can put the word like fun to it, like it makes it really enjoyable actually to practice noticing things, because this idea that we started with, God inhabits this world. You're in a God-bathed world, and you're going to find him. When you look for him, seek and you will find. Like that's just kind of a basic law in the world that we're living in. We're going to find him in some pretty surprising ways.
And coming back to our point, this can happen now. Is that a true statement?
This very moment.
Which is so redemptive in a world of chasing after grandeur, right? And chasing after whether it be mountaintop experiences or euphoria or huge superhero moments, right? We live in a superhero-crazed society, that God might have something in plan for us today. In fact, he does.
Right.
And as you mentioned, you kind of captured a picture there of this density of space that so much goes without our notice, but it's a very God-dense world that we live in, and we'll find him everywhere we inspect.
Absolutely, yeah. He holds it all together, and so you'll find his imprint on it all. There's something you said, too, about, some people might be listening to this and be in like a really dark time, or like there's a real trial going on, or there's a real weakness that's been revealed. How do we think about that in terms of like God seems really distant right now? The beauty seems really hard to find in the pain. But even in those moments, when we think again about Jesus, who was really good at living ordinary and at revealing that extraordinary reality behind it all, who experienced immense suffering, and then he turned to his followers and he's like, I'm going to experience that with you. You're going to go through a lot of things, and it's going to be really hard at times, right? And this speaks back to that expectations idea. It's like there will be hard things and hard times, and it will seem dark at times, but your communion with me will remain. I will be there with you to the end of it all.
What I'm hearing you say here, whether it's ordinary or whether it's dark, whatever today is, holiness is possible. Blessing is possible. Bringing pleasure to God is possible. Is that right?
Oh, yes. In our weakness, his power is made manifest. He meets us in our weakness in all of those times. His power is seen and he is glorified. Jesus talks in John 15 about having us abide in the vine. Abide in the vine, abide in me. And he ties this with doing. He's like, if you keep my commandments, you abide in my love, right? So there's things to be doing. And so that really leads us to think about it in terms of, I'm learning to be in two places at once, where I'm eating my bowl of cereal in the morning and I'm in the Father's presence. I've made my home with him. I'm abiding with him there. Or I'm on my morning commute to work. Perhaps I'm stuck in traffic, but I'm in the presence of the Spirit. Or I'm having coffee with a coworker, or I'm calling, my mother-in-law on the phone on my way home from work. Whatever it is, I'm doing all of those things in the presence of God. I'm doing email, right? I'm doing work, but I'm learning to do that in the presence of God.
I love that concept of two places at one time. A lot of it has to do with posture.
Absolutely.
In fact, that might be the switch in our head that helps us understand this. That when we switch from performance to posture, a lot falls into place about how we can live in the now.
Right. When we're engaged in performance, we're pretty outcome focused. But I think that we often find that we don't have a whole lot of say over outcomes in reality. But when we're focused on our posture of heart, if we can stay in that communion with him, then our posture's right.
We can't control outcomes, but we can control posture. Isaac, I love in the Psalms, I think a couple times God says he remembers that we're dust. God is so aware of our frame. He so understands our human experience. After all, he created us. But we have Christ who lived it, right? Who took on that frame. That is, I think, a powerful sanction of our human experience. Even as frail as we are, we don't necessarily need to see it as oppositional to God.
Yeah, that's true. I think those opportunities, again, of seeing our frailty and seeing our own weakness are our drivers to lead us back into communion with God, to find his strength in our weakness, to find his life, to inhabit us.
That alone is an amazing. That it is God's plan for him to inhabit us, to enter into us. And that's what the Holy Spirit does.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another powerful way, I guess, where God lives in the ordinary, doesn't he?
Wherever you are, he'll be there.
Yeah. Isaac, thanks for this time together in discussing this matter, which applies to every single person because we all live ordinary lives. So thanks for bringing some clarity to that, giving us a framework, helping us with a mindset, helping us kind of pivot our thinking in helpful ways. What parting thoughts do you have in encouragement for the ordinary life?
I think I would just close with a quote from another Christian writer, William Paulsell, who said, "There is nothing that will enrich our lives more than a deeper and clearer perception of God's presence in the routine of daily living."
I really like that. And all of us will have some routine today, so we'll be able to put that to practice. Thankful for each one of you.